Welcome to the Deep Dive. We sift through the noise, pull out the key insights from a whole stack of sources, really, to help you get informed fast.
Glad to be here.
So today we're tackling something surprisingly universal. It's a human tendency that honestly touches every single one of us.
Yeah.
Feedback avoidance.
Mm-hmm.
And this isn't just, not liking criticism. It's much deeper, a complex thing with pretty big implications for, everything in your life.
It really is. And what's fascinating is that avoiding feedback, it's not always a conscious choice, is it?
Right.
It's more like this complex dance. You've got primal survival instincts, cognitive shortcuts we all take, even behaviors we just sort of pick up.
Like that approach avoidance conflict.
Yeah.
Kurt Lewin's idea.
Exactly that. It's that internal tug of war you feel when, say, a goal has good and bad sides.
Okay.
Think about a promotion sounds great, right? But maybe it means more stress, longer hours, that push-pull. It can lead to hesitation, putting things off, sometimes even kind of sabotaging yourself. And the closer you get to the decision, the stronger that avoid feeling can get.
That paralysis by analysis thing.
Precisely. You just get stuck.
So it's like our brains are running on old software sometimes. Stone Age stuff.
In a way, yes. Our wiring often flags negative feedback as danger, like a literal attack.
Which triggers fight or flight.
Exactly, instead of, thoughtful engagement. Even Freud talked about self-preservation, how our ego builds defenses rationalizing, denial to handle anxiety, protect itself.
Even if it twists reality a bit.
Even then. And the real kicker, the people who could benefit most from feedback.
They're often the ones dodging it.
Right. Cutting themselves off from the very information they need to grow. It's a paradox.
But we're not just looking at the psychology today, are we? We're bringing in a different perspective.
That's right. Using an AI lens.
How does that help?
Well, AI can crunch massive amounts of data on human interaction. It can spot really subtle patterns we'd miss, model complex systems, even simulate outcomes.
So it moves us beyond just stories or single observations.
Exactly. Towards something more systematic, maybe even predictive about how feedback works or doesn't work.
And this avoidance thing. It's everywhere, isn't it?
Absolutely universal. Across time, cultures, gender, age, its effects just ripple outwards.
Through your personal life.
Family dynamics, how productive organizations are, whether schools are effective, community harmony, even international relations and politics, it's everywhere.
So our mission today, for you listening, is pretty clear. We want to peel back the layers on this, understand why it happens.
Explore that pervasive impact across all these different human systems.
And ultimately, maybe look at how we could start to build, a culture that's more open to feedback, globally even.
That's the goal.
Okay, let's get into the science then. The psychological gears grinding away behind this resistance. That approach avoidance conflict seems key.
It really is central, that inner tension. It fuels rumination, worrying about what might happen, and that paralysis.
And the research shows something interesting there, right, about fear.
Yes. A higher fear of negative evaluation doesn't just make you avoid criticism. It actually makes you slower to approach any feedback, even potentially good feedback.
Wow. Okay, so it's deep-seated. Self-preservation again.
Definitely. Our primitive brain, wired for survival, it just sees negative feedback as a threat. Full stop.
And that links to our sense of self-worth, maybe stuff from childhood.
Often, yes. If parental criticism felt like, a rejection of you fundamentally, that pattern can stick. Your amygdala, the brain's little threat detector.
Watchtower.
Yeah, the watchtower, it reacts like criticism is a physical danger. It pumps out stress hormones, and your rational brain can just get bypassed.
And on top of that, we've got these cognitive biases working against us. The unconscious shortcuts. System 1 thinking.
Right. They really mess with objective feedback processing, like the self-serving bias.
Where successes are all me, failures are someone else's fault or circumstances.
Pretty much, which makes it really hard to accept critical feedback about our own actions. It feels easier to blame something external.
Okay. And then there's negativity bias.
Ah, yes. Our brains naturally give more weight to negative stuff, so even a tiny critique can feel huge, trigger defensiveness, withdrawal.
And overshadow maybe 10 positive comments.
Exactly. Like that one bad online review you can't stop thinking about.
Right. And confirmation bias.
That's where we actively look for, interpret, and remember information that confirms what we already believe.
And ignore or dismiss anything that challenges it.
Precisely. It reinforces our existing views, even if they're flawed. We build echo chambers for ourselves.
And the sneakiest one.
Yeah.
The bias blind spot.
Yes. We're great at seeing bias in other people, but our own thinking, all that's perfectly objective, of course.
Which makes it super hard to see our own resistance to feedback, especially if you're, say, in charge of something.
Absolutely. And these biases, they often team up, creating this kind of psychological fortress against uncomfortable truths, really blocks learning.
Yeah, I can see that. Which leads into cognitive dissonance, right?
Yeah.
That uncomfortable feeling.
Exactly. When your beliefs clash or your actions don't line up with your beliefs, it feels bad, mentally uncomfortable.
So to reduce that tension.
We rationalize. Or we seek out info that supports our original stance. Or we might even just decide the person giving the feedback doesn't know what they're talking about. Anything but changing our behavior.
It's a big reason for denial, isn't it? And making excuses.
A core reason.
Okay, what about learned helplessness? That sounds bleak.
It can be. If you face repeated challenges you feel you can't control, you might just stop treating, give up on changing things.
Leading to inaction.
Profound inaction sometimes. And that can morph into experiential avoidance, where you actively start dodging anything, internal thoughts or external situations that might trigger discomfort or remind you of failure.
And trying not to think about something just makes you think about it more.
That's the paradox, yes. Thought suppression often backfires.
And finally, self-deception. Believing what we want to be true.
Even when the evidence is staring you in the face. In leadership, this is particularly dangerous. Creates blind spots, kills accountability, makes people dig their heels in against feedback.
It's not just a thinking error then.
No, it can be a real ethical lapse, honestly. It harms the whole system.
So let's switch gears slightly. How does this actually look inside our heads? The neurology of it all. The amygdala, that threat detector.
It's hyper alert. It treats negative feedback like, well, like a predator is nearby. Releases cortisol, adrenaline.
Racy heart, tense muscles.
Yeah.
The whole stress response.
Yep. Studies even show just hearing the word incorrect can light up the amygdala significantly.
But it's not all reaction, is it? The prefrontal cortex plays a role. Our rational brain.
Absolutely. The PFC, our wise commander, is involved in decision-making, in managing those emotional flare-ups.
So how does it interact with feedback?
When feedback is framed as informative rather than just critical, it tends to activate a specific part, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. And that actually helps calm down the amygdala's negative response.
Okay, and here's the hopeful part, right? Neuroplasticity. Our brains can change.
This is key. We can literally rewire these pathways. It's amazing, actually. Research suggests that something as simple as pausing and labeling your emotion, like saying to yourself, okay, I'm feeling defensive right now, can significantly dampen that threat response.
Just naming it helps.
It can reduce the amygdala's activity and activate the prefrontal cortex. It shifts you potentially from automatic defense towards curiosity. It gives you a choice in how you respond.
That's powerful. And how does dopamine fit in? The reward chemical.
Dopamine is crucial for learning. Positive feedback gives you a little dopamine hit, reinforces the behavior, makes you want to do it again.
Makes sense.
But if negative feedback isn't constructive, if it just feels like punishment, it can actually reduce dopamine-driven motivation. It makes you want to avoid the situation next time.
Which, again, blocks learning.
Exactly. It shuts down the very process feedback is supposed to support.
Okay, so we've got the psychology, the neurology. Let's look at how this actually shows up, the manifestations. How does it impact us as individuals?
Well, you see the classic behaviors, don't you? Defensiveness is a big one.
Getting your back up immediately.
Right. Or denial, that didn't happen, or it wasn't that bad. Blame shifting, pointing fingers elsewhere, minimizing the issue.
Or just straight up avoiding the conversation. Ghosting the feedback.
Yes. Or counterattacks, turning the criticism back on the giver. Selective listening, only hearing the parts you want to hear. Or just shutting down emotionally.
They're all coping mechanisms, really, driven by those fears we talked about.
Predictable strategies, yeah. And they really take a toll on our self-perception. Criticism often gets internalized, doesn't it? As meaning we're inferior somehow.
Especially if you're already insecure. Maybe stuff from childhood again.
Precisely. If criticism from parents felt like a fundamental rejection, that can create deep wounds. People with social anxiety, for instance, often feel negative feedback much more intensely, and it can really damage their self-image for a long time.
So unmanaged criticism leads to low self-esteem, that negative bias.
It can. And it often links to difficulties regulating emotions if, as a child, your feelings were consistently ignored or dismissed.
You don't learn how to handle them effectively as an adult.
Right. You might become hypersensitive to anything that feels like rejection. feedback automatically feels like a threat, a personal attack.
And this really hits home in relationships, I imagine. Conflict avoidance.
Oh, massively. It's so relevant daily. Avoiding conflict doesn't make problems vanish, does it?
No, they just simmer.
Exactly. They fester, erode trust, create emotional distance. Think about dysfunctional families. Sometimes there are these unspoken rules. Don't talk, don't trust, don't feel.
Which just stops any real resolution.
And can lead to insecure attachment styles later in life. Even things like using the silent treatment, sulking. They just escalate things.
Okay, so these individual patterns then scale up, right, to bigger systems.
They absolutely do. Look
Yep.
at family systems. Certain communication patterns, like families where harmony is prized above any real discussion, the protective type.
Or the opposite, laissez-faire, where there's just not much engagement at all.
Right. Both styles can unintentionally pass down feedback avoidance from one generation to the next, setting kids up for challenges later on.
And in the workplace. I see this all the time.
Oh, yeah. Fear is a big driver there. Fear of negative consequences, lack of psychological safety, maybe no clear way to give feedback, or poor communication generally.
So you get the same stuff. Defensiveness, blame games between teams.
Emotional shutdowns when tough issues need discussing. And the results: lower productivity, poor morale, people leaving.
And critically, innovation just gets choked off.
Completely. If no one's giving honest feedback, the organization is flying blind. Quality drops, things stagnate, it's dangerous.
What about education? How does it show up there?
Well, on an individual level, teachers might resist new teaching methods or professional development feedback. Systemically, big policy reforms often stumble.
Why is that?
Often stakeholder resistance, maybe the goals aren't clear. Sometimes policymakers don't fully grasp the research, or crucially, they don't involve the people on the ground, teachers, principals in the process.
So you get this gap between policy and what actually happens in schools.
A big disconnect, leading to wasted effort, programs that don't last.
And in our communities. Local decision-making.
Conflict avoidance there means important local issues might never get properly addressed. Trust in local government erodes. Opportunities are missed.
Like in urban planning you mentioned? If public input is ignored,
Yeah, you end up with projects that don't fit the community's needs, money gets wasted, people get frustrated. It's so important to close the loop.
meaning,
Show people how their feedback was actually considered and used, even if the final decision wasn't exactly what they wanted. That builds trust.
okay, widening the lens even further. Intercultural relations. Diplomacy.
This is fascinating. Cultural differences in how feedback is given and received, direct versus indirect, high context versus low context, can cause huge misunderstandings.
Leading to deadlock.
Entrenched positions, definitely. Think about high context cultures where meaning is implied versus low context where everything is spelled out. A polite, indirect refusal in one culture might be totally missed by someone from another.
That can have serious consequences in diplomacy.
Catastrophic ones historically. Deliberate avoidance of communication or just not paying attention deficit diplomacy has led to major failures.
Which brings us to political governance and leadership. History seems full of warnings ignored.
Tragically so. Pearl Harbor, the intel is there, but the dots weren't connected. The Challenger and Columbia disasters engineers voiced concerns about O-rings, about foam strikes, but those warnings were overridden or minimized.
Chernobyl.
Flawed design, feedback actively suppressed. The consequences were unthinkable.
And it's not just ignoring warnings, it's actively suppressing dissent too, right?
Yes, throughout history, from things like the Sedition Acts during World War I to modern authoritarian regimes censoring information, it might consolidate power short-term.
But it cuts leaders off from reality.
Exactly. They lack accurate information. Threats aren't detected until they're massive. Look at the collapse of the Soviet Union or East Germany. The internal feedback loops were broken for decades.
And ignoring science.
Huh?
Climate change comes to mind.
A huge example with massive societal costs or underfunding vital research. Historically, think of the church resisting Copernicus and Galileo on the heliocentric model. Ideological resistance blocking critical progress.
It happens in business constantly too. Kodak and digital cameras.
The classic example, they invented it but shelved it to protect their film business. Ignored the market shift.
BlackBerry missing the boat on touchscreens.
Another one, resisting the change, ignoring the feedback from the market and maybe even internally.
So the pattern is clear. Suppressing feedback, ignoring warnings. It leads to stagnation, lack of adaptation.
Absolutely. It stifles innovation and ultimately holds back progress, whether it's a company or an entire society.
This raises some pretty big ethical questions, doesn't it, about responsibility?
It really does. On one hand, you could argue there's a kind of moral duty to provide constructive feedback when it's needed. It helps people grow, corrects misunderstandings, it's a catalyst.
And on the flip side,
Maybe a moral obligation to actively seek feedback.
yeah,
To use a reflective intelligence, as some philosophers call it, to look at the consequences of our actions and be willing to revise our judgments based on feedback.
and in leadership, that self-deception we talked about,
Yeah.
it's more than just a mistake.
I'd argue it's a significant ethical failure. It blinds leaders, erodes trust, and undermines the whole basis of accountability.
So society has a role, too, in fostering criticism.
A responsibility, perhaps, to encourage constructive criticism. Dealing with errors openly helps groups and organizations get better.
But we also need patience. Right. People resist for deep reasons.
Tolerance and patience are important, yes. Understanding why someone resists is crucial. But that doesn't mean accepting an action indefinitely. Sometimes firmness is needed to push past resistance for the greater good.
And challenging self-deception, especially in powerful positions.
Society needs to do that, because unchallenged self-deception in leaders can enable really harmful actions, spread untruthfulness, and that lack of accountability.
Which is so tied to avoiding feedback.
It just poisons the well, leads to low morale, distrust, breakdown of public trust and service.
Okay, let's shift towards the future now. AI seems poised to potentially change this landscape. How can it help?
Well, first as a diagnostic tool. AI can analyze huge data sets, think communication patterns in an organization, maybe even public sentiment online, to spot subtle signs of feedback resistance.
Things humans might miss. Early warnings.
Potentially, yes. And it can model complex systems, simulate scenarios. What happens if we intervene this way? What if we do nothing? That gives decision makers valuable intelligence.
And beyond diagnosis, can help with interventions.
That's the really exciting part. Imagine personalized feedback systems. AI could tailor how feedback is delivered, not just what's said, but the tone, the framing, based on what we know about an individual's likely biases, their emotional triggers, maybe even their cultural background.
To maximize the chance it actually lands well.
Right, and AI-powered training simulations.
Practicing feedback.
Exactly. Safe spaces to practice both giving and receiving difficult feedback. The AI could provide objective, instant analysis of your approach, your reactions, helps you rewire those neural pathways without real-world pressure.
Building muscle memory for better feedback conversations.
Sort of, yes. Plus, early warning systems. AI could monitor communication flows, sentiment, and flag emerging patterns of avoidance before they become ingrained problems, allowing leaders to step in proactively.
That sounds incredibly powerful. But there must be ethical considerations, big ones.
Huge ones. First and foremost, bias in AI. If the AI learns from data reflecting existing human biases.
It could just perpetuate or even amplify them, make things worse.
Precisely. So, fairness, transparency in how the AI works, and constant auditing are non-negotiable. We need to be vigilant about that.
And privacy. Analyzing personal feedback patterns feels intrusive.
Extremely sensitive. Robust data protection, anonymization where possible, and critically clear, informed consent from individuals are absolutely essential. You can't bypass that.
And the risk of over-reliance, losing the human touch.
That's the autonomy concern. AI should be a tool to augment human judgment, to provide insights, not to replace empathy, intuition, or the final human decision.
The goal is empowerment, not dictatorship by algorithm.
Exactly, empowering us to be better at feedback, not offloading the responsibility entirely.
So wrapping this all up, this avoidance tendency is deep, it's universal, it affects everything.
It really is, rooted in our biology, shaped by psychology, playing out across every level of human interaction.
And the path forward towards, I guess, a more flourishing world, it requires a conscious shift.
A very deliberate shift towards feedback receptivity. You could almost think of feedback like a law of nature for systems that need to adapt. Like in biology, no feedback, no evolution, no adaptation.
If things just stagnate or die off.
Pretty much. Without feedback, growth stalls.
So for you listening, what are the key takeaways, the actionable things?
Well, fostering emotional literacy and resilience, starting early if possible, helps us handle the discomfort feedback can bring.
Cultivating a growth mindset, that's crucial, isn't it? Seeing feedback as fuel for improvement, not a verdict on your worth.
Absolutely. And creating psychological safety in our families, our teams, our communities, making it okay to make mistakes, to speak up, to learn openly.
Institutionalizing feedback, too. Making it normal, expected.
Yes. Building robust, transparent feedback mechanisms. Make it part of the system, not an awkward add-on.
Leveraging AI, but carefully and ethically.
Responsibly, yes. To enhance our own abilities, not replace them.
And finally, championing ethical leadership. Leaders who model accountability, transparency, and are open to feedback themselves.
That sets the tone for everyone else. It's critical.
So, a final thought for you to take away from this deep dive. Ponder this. How might understanding the science behind why we avoid feedback actually change how you approach it?
How you seek it out, how you react when you receive it, maybe even how you give it to others.
How can you, personally, start turning that ingrained avoidance into a catalyst? A tool for real progress for yourself and maybe for the systems you're part of. Something to think about.
This is DigitView.